A quiet night cloaks the forgotten village of Santa Esperanza. The wind whispers through broken shutters, rustling dry leaves across dirt roads. Most of the houses are dark, abandoned or crumbling, but in the heart of the village, a dim light glows from a small chapel. All seems still until strange noises echo from the nearby woods. A branch snaps, dogs bark in the distance. Something is about to happen, something that will awaken the past and change everything. Inside the modest chapel lives José Ramirez, a 72-year-old pastor known for his kindness and calm demeanor. He lives with Shadow, his loyal black dog, who never leaves his side. To the villagers, José is a gentle soul, a man of prayer and peace, but they don't know his full story. Decades ago, José wasn't holding a Bible. He was holding a rifle. A combat veteran from a war long forgotten, trained in tactics and survival, José carries scars no one sees. When drug traffickers set their sights on Santa Esperanza, they expect an easy conquest. The village is small, poor and unprotected, but they didn't count on José. When these men bring violence to his doorstep, they awaken a side of him buried deep beneath years of silence and scripture. He becomes the last line of defense in a place abandoned by the world. What's about to unfold is a story of courage, redemption, and unexpected strength. This isn't just about good versus evil. It's about a man facing his past to protect his present. You won't want to miss what happens next. Stay with us until the end, and if powerful stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe for more narratives that leave a mark. Santa Esperanza was the kind of place maps barely acknowledged. Nestled between dry hills and dusty plains, it had once been a lively agricultural hub. Now time had worn it down. The government had long since turned its back on the village. Potholes scarred the single road that led in and out. The electricity failed more often than it worked, and the nearest hospital was over 50 kilometers away. But despite its hardships, the village held on to something rare, its soul. The people were humble and hardworking, survivors in every sense of the word. They rose with the sun and returned home at dusk with their hands stained from labor. They shared food when there wasn't enough, and laughter echoed in the plaza during Sunday gatherings. Faith held the town together, thread by thread. At the center of this fragile world stood José Ramirez's chapel, a simple building with peeling white paint, a crooked bell tower, and a wooden cross that had weathered decades of storms. José had lived there for nearly 20 years, offering sermons, blessings, and quiet comfort to his neighbors. He asked for nothing in return, surviving on what little the community could spare and on his own resilience. Every morning, José would walk to the plaza with Shadow by his side, greeting everyone with a warm nod. Children loved the dog. He was calm but alert, always watching, always present. Shadow had been a gift from a dying friend, and José often said the animal had a better sense of character than most men. That particular week, though, something felt different. People spoke in hushed tones. A black SUV had been spotted parked near the edge of town, windows tinted, engine running even when idle. No one recognized the driver. Then another appeared, this time closer to the main road. Strangers, tall, silent men with hard eyes, were seen walking near the fields. They weren't from around here and they didn't speak. José noticed. He always noticed. He had a way of observing things most missed. The way the birds stopped singing, the sudden stillness in the wind, the fear in a mother's eyes as she held her child tighter than usual. That evening, as José locked the chapel door, he looked down at Shadow. The dog growled low, his ears twitching toward the trees beyond the fence. José didn't need to ask why. He felt it too, a coldness in the air as if the land itself was holding its breath. Back inside, he lit a candle and knelt to pray. "Lord, whatever is coming," he whispered, "give me the strength to face it." The next morning, he visited the village store. Doña Marta, who ran it for over 30 years, was visibly shaken. "Padre," she whispered, "they're not just passing through. They're watching us." "Who?" he asked, already knowing. She glanced over her shoulder. "The men in black. I saw them talking to young Diego. Offered him money. Threatened him when he said no." José clenched his jaw. "Did you call the police?" She let out a bitter laugh. "They won't come out here, we're alone." That word rang in his ears. Alone. Jose had faced worse, much worse, but it had always been in a different time under different rules. This was his home now, and he had promised never to return to the man he once was. But promises are fragile when danger knocks at your door. That night, he sat by the chapel window, watching the shadows grow longer. He cleaned his reading glasses, sipped lukewarm coffee, and listened to the silence. Shadow sat by the door, unmoving. A truck drove slowly through the village at midnight. No headlights, no license plates. Jose didn't sleep. Something had arrived in Santa Esperanza, and Jose Ramirez, the quiet old pastor, was no longer sure if faith alone would be enough to protect what he loved. And this was only the beginning. 2 days later, the black SUV returned. This time it didn't stay on the edge of the village. It rolled slowly through the center of Santa Esperanza, its tinted windows hiding the eyes inside. The villagers stopped what they were doing. Mothers clutched their children. Farmers gripped their tools a little tighter. No one dared speak. The vehicle came to a halt near the plaza. The doors opened. Out stepped a man in a crisp white shirt, gold rings glinting on his fingers, and dark sunglasses that reflected everything while revealing nothing. His presence was like a sudden drop in temperature. People looked away as he walked by, as if eye contact alone could bring consequences. He was known only as El Jaguar. Rumors of his violence preceded him. A cartel leader with a reputation built on cruelty and precision, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Where he walked, others knelt. His real name was forgotten, erased by the jungle he once ruled and the blood he had spilled. Jose watched from the chapel steps, shadow at his feet. When their eyes met, even through the sunglasses, time seemed to slow. El Jaguar gave a small nod, almost respectful, before walking into the old cantina with 2 of his men. Inside, he bought a round of drinks for the room, but no one touched them. He spoke softly to the owner, asked about land, water sources, abandoned homes. There was no doubt he wasn't just passing through, he was scouting. Jose walked into the cantina without hesitation. The room tensed as he approached El Jaguar's table. "Welcome to Santa Esperanza," Jose said calmly. "But I must ask, what business brings you here?" El Jaguar leaned back, his smile tight and cold. "Pastor, I admire courage, but questions can be dangerous." "I'm too old to fear them," Jose replied, his voice steady. "And this village is under my care." El Jaguar studied him for a long moment. "I respect men of God," he said, "as long as they stay in their lane." Shadow growled low from the doorway. El Jaguar glanced at the dog, then back at Jose. "Control your beast, before someone else has to." Jose's eyes never left his. "He only bites when there's danger." Silence fell. Then El Jaguar laughed, short, sharp, unsettling. He stood, placing a firm hand on Jose's shoulder as he passed. "We'll be seeing each other again, Padre." By sunset, new vehicles had arrived. Men in black clothes set up temporary camp near the edge of the village. Their weapons were visible now. No more pretense. The message was clear. Santa Esperanza was being taken. Jose returned to the chapel. Shadow followed, restless, ears always moving. Inside, Jose removed a small wooden box from under the floorboards. Inside were a few old medals, a worn photograph of a soldier beside his brother, and a knife, polished, lethal, silent. He stared at it for a long moment, then closed the box. He wasn't that man anymore, but outside, danger was growing, the kind that didn't listen to sermons. That night, a villager's home was broken into. No one was harmed, but the message was carved into the door. New rules. New order. Fear rippled through Santa Esperanza. People locked their doors. Children whispered. The church saw fewer visitors the next day. Hope was thinning. But Jose stood firm. In front of the chapel, he rang the old bell at noon as he always did. He greeted every passerby. He prayed louder. And when no one was watching, he trained Shadow to follow his hand signals, just like in the old days. El Jaguar had come to take the village. but he didn't yet understand what or who he was up against. The sun rose behind a curtain of fog, casting long shadows over Santa Esperanza. It should have been a peaceful morning, but unease settled over the village like a heavy blanket. People walked faster, spoke less, and kept their eyes low. The tension was no longer subtle, it was suffocating. Despite the fear, Jose remained a pillar of calm. He still visited homes to offer prayer, still lit candles at dusk, still swept the steps of the chapel every morning. But he felt it, something darker creeping closer. One afternoon, while returning from delivering food to an elderly widow, Jose noticed two strangers standing near the school. They weren't speaking, just watching. Children playing soccer paused when they saw them. The ball rolled to a stop. Jose approached slowly. "Can I help you?" he asked. One of the men tilted his head. "You're the priest, right?" "I'm a pastor," Jose replied, "and I serve this village." The other man grinned. "Then serve it wisely, don't make noise where there should be silence." Without waiting for a reply, they walked off. That night, Shadow wouldn't sleep. He paced, tail stiff, growling at the door every time a twig snapped outside. Jose sat quietly at his desk, pretending to read scripture, but his eyes were on the window. The following day, a group of men passed by the chapel. They were loud, careless, showing their weapons in daylight now. One of them kicked over a basket of fruit a young boy was carrying. The boy didn't cry. He just picked up the fruit and walked away. Jose had seen enough. He stood outside the chapel and spoke to the group as they passed. "This is a peaceful place. Don't ruin what little these people have." A tall man with a scar over his lip stepped forward. "And what are you going to do, old man? Pray us away?" Jose didn't flinch. "Sometimes prayer does more than bullets." They laughed and walked off, but Jose noticed one of them linger, a young man, maybe 20, with unsure eyes. He looked back at Jose as if trying to remember what decency felt like. Later that evening, while Jose was feeding Shadow near the church garden, he heard a shuffle behind him. Before he could react, one of the traffickers tried to sneak up. But Shadow was faster. He lunged without hesitation, biting deep into the man's arm. The attacker screamed, trying to shake the dog off. Jose grabbed a shovel and swung, knocking the man to the ground. Shadow stood over him, teeth bared, eyes wild. The man scrambled away, leaving behind a knife and his pride. The noise had drawn a small crowd. Villagers stood at a distance, stunned. Doña Marta was the first to speak. "They'll come back, Padre, and worse." Jose wiped blood from the shovel. "Then we'll be ready. But we're farmers, Jose, we're not fighters." "I wasn't always a pastor," he said simply. Word of the incident spread fast. That night the village was silent, more from fear than sleep. Some residents considered fleeing, but where would they go? This was their home. They had nowhere else. Jose knelt at the altar, whispering prayers not just for protection but for wisdom. The lines on his face deepened with worry. He had hoped his past would stay buried, that peace would be enough. But now he saw clearly, peace had to be defended. In the distance, Shadow barked again. Something stirred in the dark. They were being watched. And Jose knew. The next move would come soon. The moon hung heavy over Santa Esperanza, casting silver light over the chapel's cracked walls. Inside, Jose sat alone, the candle before him burning low. Shadow slept nearby, still on alert, even in slumber. But Jose's mind wasn't in the present. It had wandered back, years, maybe decades, into the darkness he rarely allowed himself to revisit. He opened the wooden box again. Inside, among the medals and fading photographs, was a letter stained with age. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was sharp, military precise. It was from his brother, Manuel. The last letter before everything changed. "Stay sharp, hermano. If anything happens, you lead. You always did." A lump formed in Jose's throat. He closed his eyes, and the memories came rushing back. He was 19, stationed far from home, deep in the jungle. Jose and Manuel had enlisted together, proud sons of farmers turned soldiers. They were assigned to a special operations unit, covert missions, infiltration. survival behind enemy lines. Jose had a gift: reading terrain, sensing movement, anticipating danger. He rose through the ranks quickly. Their missions were grueling. Rescue operations, ambushes, intelligence gathering. They operated where orders were vague and consequences final. Jose became known as El Fantasma, the ghost, silent, precise, lethal. But no mission haunted him like the one that cost Manuel his life. They had been ambushed in a canyon. An informant had betrayed their location. Bullets flew from every direction. Jose tried to cover their escape, but Manuel was hit. Jose dragged him behind a rock, applied pressure, prayed. "I'm not going to make it," Manuel said, coughing blood. "But you will. Promise me, Jose. When this ends, find something worth living for." Jose nodded through tears. "I will, I promise." Manuel smiled. "Good. Then you've already won." He died minutes later. Jose carried him for 6 kilometers on his back through enemy territory. After the war, medals didn't matter, neither did rank. The only thing Jose wanted was peace. He left the military, disappeared into the countryside, and eventually found Santa Esperanza, a quiet place where no one knew his past. He built the chapel himself, stone by stone, using his hands for something other than war, and for years he found healing. But now, with the return of violence, he felt the soldier stir inside him again. Not out of revenge, but out of duty. He had made a promise. Find something worth living for. He looked at Shadow, at the chapel, at the photo of the village children pinned to the wall. He had found it, but he would have to protect it. That same night, Jose climbed to the church tower and scanned the horizon. The cartel campfires flickered in the distance. He took a small notebook from his coat and began sketching maps, entry points, escape routes, blind spots. The instincts returned easily. Muscle memory, training burned into his bones. He was a pastor by choice. But he had been forged as a warrior. Suddenly, footsteps behind him. It was Martin, the quiet young man from the village, barely 20. He carried a bag of tools and a nervous expression. "I saw what you did the other day," Martin said. "The way you moved, how you defended yourself." Jose studied him. "What do you want?" "I want to learn, to help." Jose paused. "This isn't a game." "I know," Martin replied. "But if we don't stand, we lose everything." Jose nodded slowly. Maybe he wasn't alone after all. Maybe the past had returned not to haunt him, but to arm him once more. The next morning, long before sunrise, Jose met Martin in the chapel courtyard. The air was cold and still, thick with anticipation. Shadow trotted beside them, tail low, nose twitching at every scent in the wind. "Are you sure you want this?" Jose asked, handing Martin a burlap sack filled with sand. "There's no turning back once you start." Martin nodded. "If we don't prepare, we'll be victims." "I'd rather fight for my village than flee from it." Jose studied him for a moment, then gestured toward a makeshift wooden dummy leaning against a wall. Then, "Show me how you defend yourself." Martin swung at it clumsily. His form was full of courage, but little skill. Jose shook his head. "You're strong, but you're loud, unfocused. A real fight doesn't give you time to think. You react, or you fall." And so the training began. They started with the basics: movement, awareness, discipline. Jose taught him how to use the environment, where to hide, how to blend in, how to set up simple alarms using cans and fishing line. They ran drills at sunrise, practiced disarming techniques in the garden, and reviewed hand signals until they became instinctual. Shadow watched each session, occasionally joining in. The dog had a soldier's intuition and became a part of their team naturally. Little by little, Martin began to change. His confidence grew. His movements became precise. Jose saw in him a reflection of his younger self, eager, raw, full of purpose. They met in secret, but word slowly spread among the villagers. A few others began showing interest. A retired farmer offered to share old hunting traps. A mother brought food in silence, setting it down near their training spot without a word. Resistance was blooming, quiet but real. One night Martin asked, "Why did you stop fighting?" Jose didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the sky, then said softly, "Because I saw what war does to the soul. It takes more than it gives." "But you're fighting again," Martin said. "I'm protecting, there's a difference." That distinction mattered. It was what allowed Jose to sleep at night. He wasn't hunting enemies, he was shielding the innocent. Meanwhile, the traffickers had noticed the shift. They started patrolling the streets more aggressively. They questioned anyone out after dark. They demanded food and shelter without payment. But something else changed too. The villagers stopped looking so afraid. One afternoon, a cartel member tried to harass a teenage girl near the plaza. Martin stepped in, not violently, but firmly. "Leave her alone," the man laughed. "Or what?" Martin didn't flinch. "Or face the consequences." A silent standoff. Eventually the man backed off, spitting on the ground as he left. The girl whispered "thank you," and the whole village felt the tremor of a turning tide. That night, Jose and Martin walked the perimeter of the village together, checking traps and lines. "They'll strike soon," Jose said. "I know. And when they do, we don't fight them head-on. We outthink them, outsmart them." Martin smiled. "That's your specialty, right?" Jose chuckled. "It used to be." But deep down he knew the old skills hadn't faded. They'd simply been waiting. As the chapel bell rang the next morning, it echoed not just across the village, but into the hearts of those ready to defend it. What had once been a forgotten town was now a place of quiet resistance. The traffickers had taken control of many places before, but Santa Esperanza was different, because now it had a shepherd who could fight and a disciple ready to follow. The day the cartel returned with fury began like any other, sunlight piercing through the mist, roosters crowing in the distance, and the smell of corn tortillas in the air. But Jose felt it in his bones. The storm was coming. And it came fast. Around midday, 2 pickup trucks roared into the village square. Armed men jumped out, faces covered, rifles in hand. They shot into the air, shattering windows and silence alike. "This is your last warning," one of them shouted. "Obey or burn." They began pulling villagers from their homes, turning over tables at the cantina, kicking over market stands. It wasn't a raid, it was a message. Obey or suffer. But what they didn't know was that Jose had been preparing. When one of the men stepped toward the chapel, he triggered a thin wire between the bushes. A net sprang up, tangling his legs mid-air. He screamed, falling hard as Shadow charged forward, barking ferociously. The others turned toward the church, but Jose was ready. From behind the chapel wall, he released a homemade smoke device. Just sugar, fertilizer, and instinct. The square filled with thick white fog. Confused shouts rang out. Martin appeared from behind a water tank, flanking one of the armed men and slamming a plank into his ribs. Another villager cut the power lines, plunging the area into partial darkness. Then came the chaos. Traps triggered across the plaza, pits covered in leaves, fishing wire tripwires, slingshots with nails. Jose moved like a ghost, striking quickly, then vanishing. He disarmed one man with a well-placed kick, then turned his own weapon on him. Shadow bit down on a cartel wrist, forcing the rifle to the ground. By the time the smoke cleared, 3 of the criminals were down, groaning in pain. One limped back to the truck, shouting into a radio, "It's an ambush, they were ready." Jose stepped into the open, covered in dirt and sweat, his breath calm. "This is our village," he said. "You're not welcome here." But he knew it wasn't over. Hours later, the true message came. A bloodied man limped back into the village on foot. He held a piece of cloth in his hand, a torn sleeve stained with blood and marked with a jaguar emblem. He threw it on the ground before the chapel. "The jaguar sends his regards," he spat. "You've made your choice." Then he vanished into the trees. Jose picked up the cloth, staring at the symbol. It wasn't just a message, it was a declaration. The jaguar was coming himself. That night, the village met in secret inside the chapel. Children huddled near their mothers, men stood with arms crossed, and silence blanketed the room. Jose addressed them with quiet resolve. They will return, stronger, angrier. But we're not the same village they tried to conquer. What if they burn everything? Asked one woman. Then we rebuild, Jose answered. But we don't surrender. Martin stepped forward. We can reinforce the perimeter, dig trenches, block roads. Others began nodding. The spark had turned into flame. We are not warriors, said Doña Marta, but we have the right to defend our homes. The people agreed. For the first time in years, Santa Esperanza wasn't afraid. That night, while the villagers prepared, Jose returned to the chapel tower. He stood in the dark, watching the far hills. Somewhere out there, the jaguar was gathering his men, and when he came, they would be ready. The following morning, the sun rose blood-red over Santa Esperanza. A chill swept through the streets, not from the weather, but from the silence. No birds, no dogs barking, just a stillness that pressed down on the village like a warning. Then came the trucks, 3 of them. Armed men spilled out, this time wearing bulletproof vests and military boots. But they weren't shooting, not yet. They moved with calculated intent, surrounding the plaza like wolves encircling prey. Then he stepped out. El Jaguar, no sunglasses this time. His eyes were sharp, heavy with experience. His face, though still calm, carried the tension of a man who had come to end a game he hadn't expected to lose. He walked to the center of the plaza, flanked by 2 heavily armed guards. The villagers watched from doorways and windows, frozen. "Where is the priest?" he asked aloud. Jose stepped out from the chapel, slowly, calmly, as if walking to deliver Sunday's sermon. Shadow followed at his side. "I'm not hiding," Jose said. El Jaguar gave a cold nod. "Good. Then let's not waste time. You've made your point, but I didn't come here to negotiate." "What do you want?" Jose asked. The cartel leader raised his arm. And then, gasps erupted. 2 of the traffickers dragged villagers forward. Hostages, a young mother, a teenage boy, an elderly farmer. They were bruised, tied, eyes wide with terror. El Jaguar's voice was firm. "This is your final chance. Call off your resistance. Surrender your weapons, leave this village, or they die." The words hung in the air like smoke. Jose's heart pounded, his hands clenched. He looked at the villagers, at Martin, who stood nearby, silent and tense, at the faces peering from windows. All eyes were on him. "Let them go," Jose said. "They're innocent." "Everyone is innocent," El Jaguar replied, "until they stand in my way." A long pause. Then something shifted. El Jaguar stepped closer. His tone softened. "You and I are not so different," he said. "I know who you are, Padre." Jose's jaw tightened. "You were a soldier, special forces, El Fantasma, the man who once disappeared behind enemy lines for 3 weeks and came out dragging a hostage and a wounded comrade. I know exactly who you are." Jose said nothing. El Jaguar smirked. "So you understand how this works. Strength, fear, control. You of all people should know that peace is a luxury for the powerful, not the weak." Jose's voice was steady. "That's where you're wrong. Peace is the choice of the brave." The cartel leader's eyes narrowed. He motioned toward the hostages. A guard raised his weapon. "No!" Martin shouted, stepping forward. El Jaguar raised a hand to stop the guard. "I want the priest to decide. Fight or surrender." It was a trap, and Jose knew it. A single move would spark a massacre, but giving in meant death of another kind. He took a deep breath. Then something unexpected happened. One of the traffickers hesitated. The young man Jose had seen earlier, the one with the unsure eyes, lowered his weapon, glancing nervously at the villagers. "El Jaguar," he said. "Maybe there's another way." Crack! El Jaguar backhanded him, sending him to the ground. "Anyone else?" he barked. Silence. Jose stepped forward, placing himself between the hostages and the cartel. "If you want to take someone," he said, "take me." El Jaguar stared at him for a long moment. "You think you're a martyr, Padre, but you're just a memory, a shadow." "No," Jose said softly. I'm the light you couldn't extinguish." For a moment, El Jaguar said nothing. Then he gave the order. "We return at dawn. You have until then." He turned, walked back to his truck and drove off, leaving behind a promise of fire. The villagers gathered that night in the chapel, terrified. Jose stood before them, shoulders heavy, eyes fierce. "He gave us time," he said. "Let's use it, because when dawn came, so would war." Night fell like a curtain over Santa Esperanza. The village, once quiet in its sleep, was now a hive of movement. Candles flickered behind windows, shovels scraped against dirt, and whispers of strategy filled the chapel's air like smoke from a distant fire. Jose stood at the center, a map of the village stretched out before him. Around him, villagers of all ages listened closely, no longer just farmers and storekeepers, but defenders of their home. "We only have hours," he said. "They'll come at dawn. We won't match their firepower, but we don't need to." He pointed to key areas: the main road, the narrow alleys, the old well, the school's rooftop. "We control the terrain. We choose the fight." Martin stepped forward, confident. "The booby traps are ready. We blocked the northern trail with logs. If they try to flank, they'll get stuck." Another man spoke. "We've filled jars with nails and oil, firebombs if it comes to that." Jose nodded. He didn't like the idea of violence, but survival left little room for comfort. He turned to the villagers. "No one fights alone. No one runs. We stand together. Because if we fall here, we lose more than land. We lose our dignity." Shadow barked, pacing restlessly. Even the dog knew what dawn would bring. Jose knelt beside him, whispering a prayer into his fur. "Guard them, old friend. Watch over them." By midnight, sentries were posted, and traps concealed under leaves and loose soil. The chapel bell had been rigged to sound if triggered by movement. Children were hidden in the wine cellar beneath the church, guarded by the elderly and those unable to fight. Inside the chapel, Jose lit a single candle at the altar and placed beside it his old soldier's knife. He looked to the cross. "Forgive me, Lord," he murmured. "I ask not to harm, but to protect." Martin entered quietly. "You think he'll really come?" he asked. Jose didn't hesitate. "He'll come, pride doesn't sleep." Martin sat beside him. "I used to think heroes were people in stories, but now I think they're just the ones who don't run." Jose placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "You're already a better man than I was at your age." They sat in silence, and then came the sound. Distant engines. Not many on, but loud. Approaching fast. The villagers stirred, weapons were gripped, traps checked again, hearts pounded. Jose rose. "It's time." As the engines grew louder, the people of Santa Esperanza took their positions. Behind walls, beneath carts, in the shadows of buildings they had built with their bare hands. This wasn't just a village anymore. It was a fortress of hope. And Jose, pastor, soldier, brother, stood at its heart. He looked once more to the horizon where the faintest light of morning was beginning to break through the darkness. A new day was coming, but whether it brought life or death would be decided now. The first truck appeared at the top of the hill, its headlights cutting through the early fog. Then came a second, then a third. Engines rumbled as the convoy moved slowly down toward Santa Esperanza, like predators stalking prey. Jose stood in the center of the square, shadow at his side. Behind him, villagers waited in silence, hidden behind barricades, rooftops, and alley walls. The traps were in place. The plan was clear. Now they would see if courage could hold back chaos. The trucks stopped. Armed men poured out more than before. Dozens. Their boots hit the dirt with precision. At their center, like a general stepping onto a battlefield, came El Jaguar. He wore black, no armor, just confidence. In one hand, he carried a pistol. In the other, nothing. His presence alone was enough to silence the wind. He walked forward slowly, alone, daring resistance. "Padre," he shouted. "I gave you a chance, I warned you." Jose stepped forward, calm. "You gave us no choice." El Jaguar raised his weapon, but before he could aim, snap! His foot caught a wire. A net launched from the ground, missing him by inches. He jumped back instinctively. That was the signal. Chaos exploded. From the rooftops, villagers launched projectiles, rocks, bottles, makeshift firebombs. From the ground, spikes hidden in shallow pits pierced the boots of the first wave of gunmen. Screams filled the air. Shadow lunged into the fray, targeting the nearest rifleman, his growls cutting through the noise. The man fell hard, rifle flying out of reach. Jose moved like a shadow, ducking behind barrels, flanking with purpose. He disarmed a man with a knee to the wrist and used his own rifle butt to knock him unconscious. Martin led a group to flank the second wave. They used the smoke bombs Jose had taught them to craft, ashes and sulfur creating a thick, blinding fog. Panic spread among the attackers, but El Jaguar didn't run. He stepped through the smoke with precision, eyes scanning. And then he spotted Jose. Gun drawn, he fired. The bullet grazed Jose's shoulder, sending him to the ground. Shadow barked wildly, rushing between Jose and El Jaguar. El Jaguar raised his gun again, but Jose rolled, grabbed a plank from the ground, and hurled it with force. It struck El Jaguar's hand, knocking the pistol away. The two men stood facing each other. It was no longer cartel against village. It was soldier against soldier. El Jaguar charged. Jose met him head-on. Fists collided, grunts and breath. A blow to the ribs, a knee to the gut. Years of combat returned in seconds. Jose was older, slower, but more disciplined. They grappled, dust swirling around them. Jose caught El Jaguar's arm and twisted, forcing him to the ground, but El Jaguar kicked, sending Jose back. Shadow lunged, teeth flashing. El Jaguar blocked the bite just in time, but the distraction gave Jose the opening. With one swift move, he pinned El Jaguar to the ground and pressed the old soldier's knife to his throat, panting, bleeding, shaking. El Jaguar locked eyes with him. "Do it," he spat. "End it." But Jose didn't move. Instead, he whispered, "It's not about revenge." Around them, the battle slowed. The cartel was retreating, injured, confused, leaderless. The village had held, for now, but something deeper was stirring beneath the dust. This wasn't the end, not yet. El Jaguar lay beneath Jose, his chest heaving with rage and exhaustion. The knife hovered at his throat, the blade reflecting the broken morning light. Around them, the square was quiet now. Villagers watching, some bleeding, some weeping, all breathless. Shadow stood close, growling low, ready to strike again. But Jose didn't move. "Do it," El Jaguar growled. "You think you're better than me? Then kill me. End it." Jose looked into his eyes. Not with hatred, but with something deeper. Recognition. He saw the war inside the man, the same war he had once fought in himself. "I've already taken enough lives," Jose said. "I won't take yours." El Jaguar sneered. "Mercy is weakness." "No," Jose replied. "Mercy is the only strength that can break a cycle like yours." For the first time, the cartel leader blinked, his gaze faltering. Then a voice rang out, "Drop the knife!" Jose turned and froze. One of the cartel's lieutenants stood behind him, gun raised, eyes burning. But it wasn't just any lieutenant. It was the young man Jose had noticed before, the one with unsure eyes. But now there was no doubt in his expression. He wasn't pointing the gun at Jose. He was pointing it at El Jaguar. "I'm done," the young man said. "So you lied to us. You said we'd protect our people, but all we've done is destroy." El Jaguar sat up slowly. "You don't know what you're doing, hijo." The young man's hands trembled. "My brother lived in this village. You killed him last year. I found out. I didn't say anything. I was afraid, but not anymore." The silence was deafening. Jose slowly stood, lowering the knife. The young man turned to him. "I don't want to be part of this, not this life." Jose nodded. "Then lay it down." And he did. He dropped the rifle, hands in the air, tears on his cheeks. El Jaguar watched it all unfold, and something inside him cracked. Not fear, not panic, but shame. The years of command, of terror, of cold, calculated cruelty, unraveled by a moment of truth. He looked at Jose, then at the villagers surrounding them, at the children clutching their mothers, at Shadow standing tall like a guardian of something sacred. "I don't know how to change," he whispered. "You start by surrendering," Jose said. El Jaguar looked down at his own hands, bloodied, scarred. Then slowly he raised them into the air. Around the square, gasps broke out. Then disbelief. Then relief. Weapons were lowered. Cries turned to murmurs. The cartel members, seeing their leader surrender, scattered, some dropping guns, others fleeing into the hills. The battle was over, but the war within had only just ended. Jose turned to the villagers. It's finished. Tears flowed. Hugs were exchanged. The wounded were helped. And over it all the chapel bell rang, this time not as a warning but as a declaration. Peace, hard-earned, had returned. Later that day, as the village worked to recover, Jose sat beside El Jaguar in the chapel, his arm bandaged, his heart heavy. "You were a soldier once," El Jaguar said. "I still am," Jose replied, "but my battle is different now." El Jaguar looked down. "I don't expect forgiveness. It's not mine to give," Jose said, "but it's yours to seek." Outside, Martin was teaching children how to tie knots and make campfires. Shadow lay on the steps, eyes closed, finally resting. For now the village was safe. But as Jose watched the horizon, he knew evil doesn't disappear. It hides, it waits. Still he smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, they were ready. The sun set gently over Santa Esperanza, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. Smoke no longer rose from violence, but from cooking fires. Children laughed again in the plaza. Doors were open. Life was cautiously returning. The church bell rang at dusk, just as it always had, but this time its echo carried peace. Jose stood at the edge of the chapel steps, a soft breeze rustling his coat. Shadow rested by his side, alert but calm. Around them, the villagers worked together, repairing, rebuilding, restoring. Fear had not disappeared, but it had been replaced by something stronger: unity. El Jaguar was no longer a leader of terror. He had surrendered willingly, and Jose had taken him into his care, not as an enemy but as a soul seeking redemption. The road ahead would be long, but as Jose had learned, even the most wounded hearts could find their way back to light. That night, as the stars blanketed the sky, Jose knelt once more before the altar. He placed the old soldier's knife back in its box and closed it, for good. His brother's voice echoed softly in his heart. When this ends, find something worth living for. He had, and he would defend it until his final breath. But peace never rests forever. In the distance, a stranger watched from a hilltop, unknown, silent, waiting. A new shadow on the horizon. Could it be another storm? Only time would tell. If this story moved you, touched your heart, or reminded you of the strength within, subscribe and share it with someone who needs hope today, because the fight for good never ends and every soul matters.